Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. In this tutorial, we will learn about Java Constructor, and Constructor is a very powerful feature in a Java. So keep watching till end. Okay, we know that Java is an object-oriented programming language. That's why in a Java, everything is related to an object, right? Similarly, constructor is also related to an object. And hence, to know about constructor, we should know the basic knowledge about class and object. And I have already made a separate tutorial on class and object. You can check it out on a link that I have mentioned in a description of this video. So before coming to this tutorial, first go through that tutorial so that you can get a clear view about constructor. So let's begin. These are the points that we are going to discuss. Why do we need a constructor? What is a constructor? Rules to write a constructor, types of constructor, and at the end we will see example. Okay, so first question is arise that why do we need a constructor in a Java, right? So we need a constructor to construct or to give values to an object's fields, or we can say constructor is used to initialize an object. Now let's understand with the help of an example. Okay, suppose you have to create a car. So for that, first you need to think about color of car, weight of car, and name of car, right? So these are the fields of a car. And suppose color is a red, weight is 1203 kg, and name is XYZ. So here red is a value of color, 1203 kg is a value of weight, and XYZ is a value of name. So basically the red 1203 kg and XYZ are the values of fields of a car object. Okay, some more examples are pencil. The color of pencil, the name of pencil are the fields of pencil. Okay, and the black and AB are the values of fields of pencil. One more example is the name of book and size of book are the fields of book. Okay, and Java and A5 are the values of fields of book. So basically each object has its own fields and values. So if we think as a programming point of view, here car is an object. Okay, these are the fields of a car object and these are the values of fields of car object. Similarly, we can create student object. So student is an object, the name of student, the roll number of student, and the standard of student. These are the fields of a student object. And the name, suppose XYZ, roll number is 211 and standard is a 5th. So these are the values of a fields of a student object. So if we have to implement it programmatically, then we can create a student object by creating a class, because class is a prototype from which object can be created. That already we have discussed in a class and object tutorial. And if we have to create a fields, then we can create a fields by declaring or creating variables. Now the question is arise how we can give these values to the fields of an object. Okay, so here constructor comes in a role. That means here constructor play an important role to give values to the fields of an object. Now let's understand it practically. Okay, so to create a student object, we need to create a student class. Okay, now we have to define a fields, and fields are nothing but the variables in a Java. That is, we can define fields by declaring variables. Okay, so we can write like this. So these are the fields of student object. Okay, now we are going to create an object. So to create an object, we can write like this. Now see here, when this code will execute, then the student object will create with its fields. Okay, because these are the instance variable, and instance means object. So these are the objects variables. That means these variables belong to an object and hence it work for object. So whenever object will create, then fields are automatically allocated under each object. Now see here, student object will create with its fields, but there are no values for fields here, right? And such an object is a useless or meaningless, right? Because if we think as a real life point of view, the whole world is made up of objects, such as human is also one of an object, and each and everyone has a specific name, right? So no one is without name. So basically each and every object has its specific name, specific values. Similarly, if we have to use object in a program, then each object must have specific value. That means each object must have to initialize so that we can use that object in our program, and hence it becomes necessary to initialize an object. But question is arise that how we can initialize an object in a Java. That means how we can give values to an object. right? So here constructor comes in a role. That means we can give values to an object using constructor in a Java. So if we think as a real life point of view, after the birth of any child, the name is given to that child at the time of naming ceremony function. Similarly, in a Java, using a constructor, values are given to an object at the time of object creation. So basically, constructor is a block of code which is used to construct or to give values to an object fields during creation of an object. Or we can say constructor is a place where object initialization takes place, and object initialization means to give values to an object. Okay, but in a Java we can use the different ways to give values to an object. That means we can give values to an object using different ways. So why do we need a constructor and why constructor is widely used than other ways? So I will explain all the ways practically with the help of an example. Then you will clearly understand why constructor is powerful feature and widely used than other ways. Okay, but before that we are going to discuss about rules to write a constructor. Then we will see type of constructor. Now we are going to see rules to write a constructor. So first, name of class and name of constructor must be same. That means the name of constructor must be matched with the name of its class. The second point, constructor don't have any return type, and this is the important difference between method and constructor. The method compulsory has a return type, but constructor doesn't have any return type. Okay. Now the third point, we can use access modifier for a constructor such as public, private, protected and default. That means constructor can be public, private, protected and default. But we cannot use non-access modifier for a constructor such as static, final, abstract and synchronize. That means Java constructor cannot be static, final, abstract and synchronize. So static, final, abstract and synchronize are non-access modifiers. I will make a separate tutorial on non-access modifiers. For now, just keep in mind that constructor cannot be static, final, abstract and synchronize. Now we are going to see important points to be remembered about constructor. Okay, so constructor is a block of code. So constructor is not a method. It just look like a method. So don't be confused. Constructor is a different thing and method is a different thing. And second point, constructor is used to give values to an object. Constructor is not used to create an object. I am raising this point because most of the beginners have a question: is constructor is used for object creation or constructor is used for object initialization? So don't get confused. Constructor is used for object initialization, not for object creation, because the meaning of constructor itself is to construct. So constructor is used to construct values to an object, is the main purpose of constructor, and new keyword is used to create an object. So simply keep in mind, constructor is used for object initialization and new keyword is used for object creation. Okay, and the third point, constructor calling takes place at the time of object creation. That means constructor is called at the time of object creation. We do not need to call constructor separately. Okay, now we are going to discuss about types of constructor. Okay, so there are three types of constructor in a Java: default constructor, no argument constructor and parameterized constructor. Okay, so first we are going to discuss about default constructor. So as we discussed earlier, to give values to an object we have to write constructor in our class, right? But if we forget to write a constructor in our class and directly create an object, then what will happen? So in this situation, compiler internally or implicitly create a constructor with zero argument, that is no argument, and gives default values to an object. Now see here, we do not declare any constructor in this class, and when we run this code, then student object will create with its fields and values. So these values are the default values given by a default constructor. So if we forget to initialize an object, then compiler automatically initialize an object with default values, because Java programming language is a statically typed language. That means all variables must first be declared and initialized before they can be used. And here fields are nothing but the variables, because we can define fields using variables, and hence it's necessary to declare and initialize variables before they can be used in our program. And that's why compiler automatically create constructor to initialize variables of an object. So basically, default constructor is a constructor created by a compiler to initialize the fields of an object with default values at the time of object creation. And remember, if we do not write any constructor in a program, then compiler create default constructor. And if we write any constructor in our program, then compiler doesn't create any constructor. Now we are going to discuss about no argument constructor. So no argument constructor is a constructor that we have to create. That means programmers need to create, and it does not have any argument or parameters, and hence it's called as a no argument constructor or non-parameterized constructor. And we can use the following syntax for a no argument constructor. First we have to write access modifier, then there will be a class name, and class name followed by opening and closing parenthesis, okay, and then there will be a constructor body, okay. And we can use 4 type of access modifier for a constructor. It's a public, private, protected, and default. That means we can declare constructor as a public, private, protected, and default. If we declare constructor as a public, then constructor accessible in all classes in a program, or we can say we can call constructor from any class in a program. And if we declare constructor as a private, then constructor cannot be called from anywhere outside the class. And if constructor declare as a protected, then constructor can call within the same package and outside of package, okay. And if constructor does not have any modifier, then it's considered as a default modifier, and in this case constructor can call within its own package. So we can write non-argument constructor like this. Now question is arise that how we can call a constructor, right? So constructor automatically call at the time of object creation. We do not need to call it separately, okay. Now see here, to create an object we need to write a new keyword, and next to the new keyword we need to write a constructor. So whenever object will create, then the constructor call this constructor and constructor get execute, okay. So simply keep in mind we do not need to call a constructor separately. Now we are going to discuss about parameterized constructor. So parameterized constructor is a constructor that programmers need to create with parameters, called as a parameterized constructor. And we can use the following syntax for a parameterized constructor. First we have to write access modifier, and next to the access modifier there will be a class name, and then we have to pass a parameters to the parameterized constructor, and the constructor body is surrounded by a opening and closing curly braces, okay. So we can write parameterized constructor like this, okay. Now listen carefully. Default constructor is also called as a no argument constructor that compiler created, and a constructor that programmers created with no argument also called as a no argument constructor, okay. So don't get confused. So basically in a Java, constructor can be created either by a compiler or programmers. Now see here, first we are going to discuss about default constructor, okay. So let's create student class to create a student object. So we can write like this. Okay. Now we are going to define fields of student. So fields of student is the name of student, right? Name of student, then roll number of student, and then standard of student. Okay. So these are the fields of student, and fields are nothing but the variable. So these are the instance variable, and instance variables are belong to an object. That means instance variables work for object. So whenever object will create, then fields are automatically allocated under each object, okay. So our class is ready to create a student object. Now we are going to create student object using a new keyword, okay. So we can write like this: student equals to student1, suppose, equals to new keyword. At the end there will be a semicolon. So in this way we can create a student object.
Now let's print the name of student, roll number of student and standard of student using println method. Okay, so we can write like this. Now see here, we won't create any constructor in this class and directly going to run this code. Okay, now let's see what will happen. Now see here, name is null, roll number is 0 and standard is null. So here null, 0 and null are the default values given by default constructor. That means if we won't create any constructor in a class, then compiler implicitly or internally create its own constructor and give default values to an object. Okay, so here student object is create with fields and default values. Now question is arise that why we cannot see default constructor in our class, right? So we cannot see default constructor in our class because compiler create default constructor at the time of compilation. That means when we execute the Java code, that is .java file, then .java file get compiled and converts into bytecode file, that is in a .class file, and compiler create default constructor during compilation, right? That means compiler create default constructor in .class file, that is in a bytecode file, and hence we cannot see a default constructor in .java file. So basically default constructor is create in .class file, and hence we won't able to see default constructor in our class. Now we are going to discuss about different ways of object initialization. Okay, so first way is we can initialize an object using instance initialization block. It's also called as instance block. Okay, so instance block can be used to initialize object fields during object creation. That means we can give our own values to an object using instance block. Now we are going to create an instance block. Okay, so we can write like this. So name equals to suppose ABC. Okay, and then roll number, suppose 101. Okay, and then standard equals to fifth. Okay, so in this way we can create instance block. Now let's create an object and print the values of fields. Now I'm going to run this code. Okay, now let's see. Now see here, our own values are assigned to the student object. Now see here, student object is create with our own values. But problem is that if we have to create multiple student objects, then same value will assign to all student object, right? But we cannot assign same name and same roll number to all students because each student must have different name and different roll number, right? Now let's check it out. We are going to create multiple objects, okay, and one more object. Now let's print the value of student 1 object, student 2 object, and student 3 object using println method. Okay, now let's run the code again. Now see here, same values are assigned to all students. So it is meaningless, right? Because we cannot give same name and same roll number to all students. Now we are going to discuss about second way. The second way is we can give values to an object at the time of variable declaration. Now see here, suppose name is ABC and roll number, suppose 101, and then standard is fifth. Now let's run the code again. Now see here, same problem is occurring here. Same values assigned to all students object. So it is also meaningless. We cannot give same values to every student. Okay. Now third way. Third way is we can give values to an student object separately like this. Okay. So student 1 dot name equals to suppose ABC. Okay. And student 1 dot roll number equals to 101. Okay, now for a standard, student 1 dot standard equals to fifth. Okay, so same we can write for a student 2 object and student 3 object. Same we can write for student 2 object. Okay, so name suppose PQR, then roll number is 10102. Okay, and then standard is fifth. Okay, same we can write for a student 3 object. Okay, now let's run the code. Now let's see what will happen. Now see here, we can give different values to each object, but problem is that for each object we have to write 3 extra line of code, and if we have to create thousands of student object in case of big application, then code become lengthy and complicated. Okay, so it will be difficult to manage, and it generally considered as a bad programming practice. Now see here, these are the ways we can use to initialize an object. Okay, now we are going to initialize a student object using constructor. Now we are going to create a constructor. So name of constructor and name of class must be same. Okay, so we can write like this: student. Okay, now see here, we are giving our own values to student object, right? That means we need to give parameters to the constructor, right? And hence we need to create parameterized constructor. So we can write like this. So we have to pass here parameters. Okay, so string student name, and then parameters are separated by comma, then student roll number. Okay, and then standard. So student standard. Okay, and now we have to write name equals to student name, then roll number equals to student roll number, and then standard equals to student standard. Now I am going to create an object. Okay, new student, then constructor. When we create an object using a new keyword, then next to the new keyword we need to write constructor, right? So this is a constructor. Okay, but this constructor doesn't have any parameter, so this is a no argument constructor, but we have created a parameterized constructor in our class, and hence here also we have to pass parameters. Okay, so we can write like this: name suppose ABC, and then roll number 101, and then standard fifth. Okay, so in this way we can pass parameters at the time of constructor calling. So whenever object will create, then this constructor call, and then the parameterized constructor get invoked that we have created in our class, and values will assign to an object. So here we do not need to call constructor separately. So whenever object will create, then constructor automatically call. Now I am going to create a no argument constructor. Okay, so constructor name and class name must be same. So we can write like this. So this is a no argument constructor, and hence we do not need to pass parameters here. Okay, so system dot out dot println, and simply put a message, simply here student info. Okay, so in this way we can create no argument constructor. Now here we have to call no argument constructor. Okay, student equals to new keyword, and next to the new keyword we need to write constructor. Okay, now see here, when this statement will execute, then this no argument constructor get called and invoke the no argument constructor that we have created in our class. And when this statement will execute, then this parameterized constructor get called and invoke the parameterized constructor that we have created in our class. So we do not need to call constructor separately. When we create an object, then at the time of object creation, the constructor automatically get call. Okay, now we are going to create multiple objects. Okay, name, suppose PQR. Okay, and then roll number 102, and then standard is 5th. Okay, and one more object, name, suppose element. Okay, and then roll number, suppose 103, and then the standard is 5th. Okay, so in this way we can create multiple objects. Now let's print values of student 2 object and student 3 object. Okay, now I'm going to run this code. Now let's see what will happen. Okay, now see here, every student has different values, right? That means different values are assigned to every student. So in this way we can give values to an object using constructor. So this is all about what is a constructor, why do we need a constructor, rules to write a constructor, and types of constructor. Okay, now I am going to end this session. So keep learning and thank you so much for watching.